Okay, Darren here, bestautodetailingtips.com. Today's subject is car paint scratch. Why do I say car paint scratch? Because I was on my computer doing some research and it's a commonly searched search term. And I'm guessing you don't want to know how to put a scratch in your car paint. You want to learn how to remove, fix, or diminish a car paint scratch. The problem is not all scratches are created equal. So how do you, as a car owner, determine what the best possible fix is when there's a lot of confusion as to what you're dealing with? So I'm going to use this test sample here today. It's a Chevy truck. I'm guessing it's at least 10 years old, and it's got a lot of scratches on it, and that's the good news for this video because I can show you case by case the different types of scratches, how to assess what you're dealing with or looking at, possible fixes, possible solutions. If you go to my website, there'll be a link and I will lay out the different types of fixes, from wet sanding kits to touch-up paint kits to just scratch removal type of compounds. So you've got a variety of fixes or solutions, and that's where I'm going to help you in determining what is the best possible fix for your situation. So let's take a look. Let's assess these different scratches on one-by-one case, and I'll talk to you and instruct as to me as a professional what I would do in my professional world. So let's get started. Okay, so here I am. I'm going to actually clear off my lens so I can see what I'm looking at. Right here we have, and it looks like it is showing, we have what I would call transfer. How do I know this? Because I've already felt it. And when you feel a scratch, that's the very first thing you want to do is feel it. And what you're feeling for is to try and determine if it is something that is above the paint or below the paint. If it's below the paint, then it's a true scratch. If it's above the paint, then it's possible what it's called transfer, meaning whatever hit this has left some material behind. Usually it's what's called paint transfer. So you scrape it, and this feels, and I can catch the edge, and actually some of my fingernail is actually removing it, so I know that this simple thing here is what would be called transfer. Now, before I actually get into possible solutions or fixes for this, I just want to take you one by one on the many different types of scratches on this truck. So right here we have what's called transfer. Right here, and I'm looking through my screen so it's hard to tell what's going to show up. I have this on high definition, so hopefully it will show up. We have a scratch right here above my nail. We have another one that's even slighter or less visible right here above my nail. Now what you do is what's called the fingernail test. Can you grab it with your fingernail? Now I can grab this as minimal as this scratch appears. I can still grab a little edge with my fingernail, and I can tell, at least I feel I can tell, that it is below, which means it's an actual scratch. But I won't know until I do further investigation. But like I said, before we get to that point, let's just look at some of these scratches. Here we have a significant scratch. Now this I know for a fact is because I can actually get my fingernail into the valley of the scratch. And you can hear, as I get closer, you can really hear my fingernail scratching that. Okay, and I can literally get my fingernail into this valley. So that is very significant. Here we have a combination of scratches. Who knows how this happened? But because there's so many fine scratches to this whole scratch pattern here, this will require multiple techniques, whether it was sanding, or there might be a little transfer even on some of these. I can't really grab a nail on this one. And it's always the good news if you can't grab a nail, because that means it's the smallest of scratches and you have more options for complete removal. But up here I can actually grab my fingernail into it, so that's not a good sign. Here it's marginal. I kind of feel something, but nothing significant where my fingernail is truly able to grab it. So that's good news. Here we have another one, and I can't really grab a fingernail into it, so that's good news. And here we have, if it's showing up, we have another one. Now, because it's so long, you can guarantee that the scratch is never going to be completely uniformed in depth from start to finish. So along here it might be deeper, then shallow, deeper, shallow. You get the point. So you have to kind of feel along it. And the point is if there's a point in the scratch where you can grab a nail, then you're kind of limited, meaning that just rubbing compound or some polish is not going to fix it. So you therefore know that the only way to either fix it completely or remove it completely is going to be through the process of wet sanding. So I'm also going to take you to one more additional scratch, which is on top of the roof. Now this is the most significant of all, because it's actually gone through the clear coat, the base coat, all the way to the metal, and it's now actually started to rust, which is not a good thing. And this is why people are inclined to fix it so that the metal underneath is not allowed to rust. This is the most extreme situation. In order to fix this, we would have to remove the rust first. I'm not really going to go into that because that's not going to be the typical scratch that most of you will be dealing with. Okay, what I have here is some various forms of products, and these products represent your first point of entry. In other words, we already went around to the various scratches and we did what's called the fingernail test. We wanted to assess as to whether it's transfer, which is the easiest to deal with, or if it's very superficial in that you can't grab a nail to it. So the smaller, the more superficial the scratch is, obviously the better results you're going to get and the easier it will be to fix it. So we've already done the fingernail test on these two scratches. What I use, and I start off with, is Mr. Clean's Magic Eraser. This is like the 8th wonder of the world. I love this tool. But something you need to know about this tool is that it indeed will abrade the paint. Now that's different than scratching the paint. It's not going to leave individual scratches like these, but it will abrade the paint. But that's pretty easy fixed. So I've got you can really use any liquid you want in this case. Now if it's truly heavy duty transfer, like let's say a door opened onto this truck and left some paint from its car and burnished it through friction onto it, it may be more difficult to remove. So transfer does not, just like everything else, it's not all created equal. So this is your first point of entry, and any type of liquid will suffice. So all I'm going to do is determine if indeed we have transfer or not. Now I don't know if it's showing up, but just that slight action that I just did actually has dulled this finish. I'm okay with that because I can fix it very easily. It has already diminished these scratches here, but I can still grab my nail to it, so I know that if I want complete removal of these scratches, I'm going to have to wet sand them away. But this pad, the Magic Eraser, did remove the transfer. It's gone. Now at this point, because I know these scratches are not going to be removed by this, I just wanted to verify that there was no additional transfer on it first, because you want to remove that first before you get into additional steps. So I've assessed. I removed the transfer here. These are minimal. So what I can do is I can now take with my cloth something like, for example, this Scratch X 2.0. It's put out Meguiar's. What you're looking for is some type of product with an abrasive to it. Now, a way to demonstrate or to test that is to put a little between your fingernails and see if you can feel a little gritty feel to it, because we want a little bit of a grit. We want something that's literally going to do some level of sanding or polishing, versus this cleaner wax. A cleaner wax is different because that's merely going to be, it's merely going to have chemical cleaners in it, so there will be no abrasives to it. So this will be less effective than this, because this actually has some form of abrasives to it. Very light abrasives, but nonetheless still some abrasives. So this really would be mostly ineffective. It would probably work on this area just to remove the abrasions that I put in with the magic eraser, but it's not going to do much for these scratches. So therefore, I'm going to put a little dab on this cloth and rub it around. And I'm using pretty aggressive pressure. Wipe it clean, and now all the abrasions that I left with the magic eraser are gone. So it can be that easy as far as removing transfer. Now, it probably isn't showing from there, but these two scratches have diminished to the point where most people would walk by this truck and never ever even notice those. So for most people's world, that's all you need to even think about. So at this point, it could be as simple as now applying this cleaner wax, which actually is a combination. It cleans through chemicals, but also leaves a coating of, perhaps I've never even used this, and there might be, yes indeed, oh yeah, there it is. These are just little samples that I get just to do these little demonstration videos sometimes. So I'll put a little cleaner wax on there, and that will restore even additional shine and leave a layer of protection on the paint. So the transfer's gone, and these have been diminished to the point where for this truck it would be appropriate, because if that was the worst of our worries, we would be in cloud 9, because it would look great. But with these other scratches, not so much. I'm going to have to do some color sanding. Another common product is the polishing compound. Now, compound really goes back to the days of early body and paint, and they call them compounds. It's a term that is misused very often, but what it really means is that it's a compound, and it's kind of pasty, and it has some form of abrasives to it. Now, honestly, this compound by Meguiar's, or I'm sorry, by Turtle Wax, if I put it between my fingernails and rub it, I virtually don't feel any type of abrasive to it. So in my opinion, if I read the directions, it might say something about the fact that it may scratch or may be clear coat safe, which would suggest that it has no actual abrasives. So this may in fact just be purely a chemical cleaner, which if it is, then it's mislabeled because it's not really a compound. So there's many products out there. Once again, if you go to my website, I'm going to give you other alternatives that are more effective than these. Not that this one didn't work, because it does, and it's ideal for all those little miscellaneous scratches, like around door handles where your fingernails catch. It is very effective for just touching up your car on those scratches or rub marks or scuffs that normal washing and waxing won't eliminate. Okay, what I'm going to do is we've got two scratches. We've got here, and then we've got over here. Now over here is these scratches I'm going to work on are just part of a bigger combination of scratches. But for this video, I'm just merely going to be working on this section and this section just to do a comparison. What I have here is 2000 grit. Now you can get sandpaper that goes up to 3000. Now what you have to worry about is a couple things. For example, whenever you do what's called wet sanding or color sanding, and the reason they call it wet sanding is not usually, but you do use it with some form of water. And what the water does, or the liquid, in this case all I'm using is my quick detailer just to lubricate it and keep it flowing. And what the liquid does is it allows the sanded material to flow and not clog up the paint. But the point is because this is an older truck, the clear coat will have already become thinner than when it was original. Now I know there's paint gauges that you can use to measure the thickness of the paint. The problem is that's going to measure the thickness between the metal panel and the top coat. How do you know how thick the actual clear coat is? Once you sand through or polish through the clear coat, it will change the color of the base coat. Now I've heard about some paint thickness gauges or meters that can actually measure the thickness of the clear coat only. I've yet to actually see one in place. I'm a little skeptical, but who knows, they probably exist. The point is that I'm going to use some common sense and experience and know that I can roughly sand just a few times on this, because I already know that this truck is old enough that I don't want to go through the clear coat. And I'm using light pressure just to sand this area, Corey. And then I'm going to sand over here, light pressure, because these are very small scratches, and anything more than light pressure and heavy duty color sanding would not be appropriate due to the age of this truck. So these kits on my website come with pre-cut sanding discs. There's different ones. There's Lenka, there's 3M. They all employ the same technique, which is the most aggressive form of scratch removal, which is sanding first, then polishing away your sanding marks, and then applying like a wax or something after the fact. So I'm just doing a light sand. I'm not applying much pressure at all. I'm allowing the sandpaper to do its job, which is to cut through and to create what's called a uniformed scratch pattern. And because it's not a big panel, I'm not worried about using a backing plate to keep this perfectly flat. That would be overthinking the moment, and it's just not a requirement for these little spot scratches. So now that this is dried, what you're looking at is actually the clear coat that has been sanded away. And if you do this, you will see the area that is now completely sanded and abraded up. And I don't know if it's going to show in the video, but there's still a visible scratch here. Now, because I'm being very cautious, for one, it's not my truck, and two, based on the year of the truck, and I did no measuring on the paint, I'm merely trying to improve the scratch and see if it will remove it. Like right now, I can't grab anything. There's no edge to catch. So I know that perhaps now I can polish this enough where it will diminish it to the point that it's acceptable results. This is still showing very slight traces of the original scratch. Now at this point, many of you will lack a buffer in order to remove these scratches. So that's where you'll have to do it by hand. Now 2000 grit, it's possible to remove it by hand, but you will have to spend a lot of elbow grease in truly removing these scratches. If you use 3000 grit, obviously it's going to be much better. So I'm going to try two products. One is Meguiar's 105. It's their Ultra Cut Compound. On the scale over here, you can see from 1 to 12. It's at the very top, which is extra heavy cut, as they call it. And I'm just going to do it by hand, see what kind of results I can get. If I can get some out of the thing. And now I'm applying lots of pressure because I want to remove those scratches, and I'm not using a buffer, I'm simply doing it by hand. And you can already see that the shine is starting to be restored. Unfortunately, our scratch is still there. And that's kind of the ironic moment of doing scratch repair or removal, is that sometimes you will actually enhance the scratch. If you cannot take it to complete removal, what you will do is, because this area will be so shined up and perfect, you actually create a greater contrast between the scratch itself and the surrounding material. So that's a possible unforeseen consequence and ripple effect of doing this. So some of you, that may be the good news, some of you the bad. At this point, I can either take my chances, do a little more color sanding, see if I can eliminate it 100%. Like I said, for demonstration purposes, I'm not really worried about moving it 100%. I just want you guys to understand the different variables of scratches. Now over here, I'm going to use a different product, which is the Mizuna. It's a high performance compound, and they have their little scale down here at the bottom, and it shows that it's the most aggressive. So I'm going to pick another section of my cloth, and I'm going to aggressively, and notice I'm doing this in the direct sunlight. This paint is probably, I don't know, I'd put it maybe 105, 110 degrees. So it's not cool paint, but that's the cool thing about these products today, is that they actually will work in direct sunlight, even though the directions, as a rule, will always say use in shaded, cool surfaces. So there I have that polished area, and in fact it looks like it sanded and polished away 100% of the scratches that I dealt with right through here. So that's pretty cool. This one not so much. What you want to do is, when you follow up with your heavy duty compound, is follow up with a polish, a true polish. And you'll notice, like this Meguiar's 205, which is meant to follow the 105, and you'll see on the scale it goes up to a level 4. So that means it's got minimal cutting abilities to it. It's more of a polish, which means it's a finer grade of abrasives as well as chemicals to enhance and now take those sanding marks that you've polished away with the 105. Now you're going to go to the next level, which is a finer, it's like sanding wood. You might start at 200 grit, then you move to 400 grit, then you move to 600 grit, because what you're doing is you're sanding away the deeper scratches by putting in thinner, smaller scratches, and so on and so forth, until there's no visible sign of abrasion or scratching, and you have a nice, finely polished surface. So I'm going to follow up with the 205. Once again, heavy duty pressure. And indeed, it does enhance the overall beauty and appearance of this panel, even more so because it's a finer polish. So it's always about steps. The most aggressive is sanding, and then compounding, which is, you know, a misused term. Some people call it compounding, some people just call it heavy duty polishing. You've got different levels of, like if you go to buffers, different types of buffers, different buffer speeds, different buffer pads. It's all about taking it into steps. The more aggressive you start out with, the more steps in between you will have or be required to do before your finished product. So sanding is the most aggressive. But this, because I use 2000 grit, which is what those kits usually come with, is either 2000 or 3000 grit. You can in fact do this at home on your own and improve the quality and appearance of your car. Now this is the Mizuna Superior Performance Polish, and as you look at this scale, it's on the other end of the scale, which means it's got slight polishing capabilities to it. It's what I would follow up with their more aggressive polish or compound, call it whatever you want. So I'm going to squeeze a little on that, go back over this area. Once again, I'm using heavy pressure, probably, if you had to guess, maybe 15 to 20 pounds of pressure. Once again in the direct sunlight, and voila, both areas have been improved and enhanced. Okay, I want to zoom in so you can see our scratch here right above my fingernail. I don't know what best angle is going to show that scratch, but it still remains. But over here, I was able to color or wet sand and polish away the scratches that were part of this bigger group of scratches. So right here is our results, which we have achieved 100% elimination of the scratches. So with that said, what did we learn today? A, not all scratches are created equal. You have many options, from removing the scratch to touching it up. Now, I did not show any touch-up paint. That's a whole nother video. So if you go to my website, the link will actually talk about a few various kits that are mostly have to do with scratch removal rather than trying to use touch-up paint. There is also a link there for Dr. Color Chip, which deals with road rash on the front end of your car. But what I really want to demonstrate is that by hand, because most of you probably will not have buffers and all kinds of polishes, then in fact these little kits, and it doesn't matter because all the kits work on the same principle. So you can get just a scratch remover, that simple little tube, and start out with the least the least aggressive, the most minimalist approach to it. See if that works. If you know you need to color sand it, there's some kits there that you can literally do by hand. There's one there you can attach to a drill motor. So the point I wanted to highlight is that all scratches are not created equal. You can in fact do it by hand. You don't have to invest in a bunch of buffers and so forth. Of course, if you do have buffers, it offers you more options, but indeed you can get acceptable results and improve the appearance of your car, truck, van, whatever it may be.